This is an exclusive conversation after a major win for Israel. Israel, according to the Iranian officials, has taken out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. This is one of the biggest targets that Israel was looking at, and it is on Iranian soil in Tehran that the residence was attacked, and Ismail Haniyeh and his bodyguard have been killed. I'm being joined by retired Colonel Jeffrey Fisher. He's from the U.S. Army. He was also Special Operation Force, former NATO Special Operation Force officer. Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel Fisher. Let's begin with the operation itself. According to you, how big could this operation have been? It was surgical, it was tactical, it was precise. So we're not looking at civilian casualties over here. So how big would you consider the operation really, and how big or detailed was the planning to ensure no civilian casualty?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on your outlet. It's my first time here, so I greatly appreciate it. And you're 100% spot on, right? This is this is a extremely surgical strike. The intelligence required to be able to get that close to him, mitigate civilian casualties, and be able to accomplish it. I mean, let's be fair. This was the guy Hamas probably protected most. He probably had the biggest security detail. He had his own likely his own intelligence forces, making sure that he was safe. He was also in a foreign country. I mean, he lives in Qatar, Oman, and he was visiting Iran. So the IRGC was also going to be providing another layer of security to protect him, right? So to be able to get through all those layers of security and get to him, according to Iran, I mean, right now, this is an interesting situation, right? So Iran's the one that's claiming his death, and we have no corroborating evidence yet. But you're 100% correct. It's extremely surgical.
Also, Colonel Fisher, would this be a smaller group of people who would have carried out such a precision strike, or more elaborate? I mean, just trying to understand what the modus operandi of the Israeli forces, of the IDF, would have been to take Ismail Haniyeh out.
Yeah, another great question, and I think right now we don't have a lot of information. What is circulating on back channels right now, and what we are hearing, is that it's a missile strike. We have no pictures or videos, right? So if I could jump away, right? Usually when we have assassinations like this in the Middle East, what is normal is we have some kind of proof of an event, right? We have a video or an image of a car that's been blown up, or bullet holes, or a building that's been destroyed. And then from there, we end up a few hours later, we hear of the assassination. This is completely different, right? We've heard of the assassination, but we have no corroborating evidence just yet. So it's a very strange situation. People like me that evaluate these things for a living professionally are a little bit flummoxed. But back to your question, right? So we've heard from the Iranians that this was an airstrike or some kind of missile strike in the air. It wasn't, a point-blank Masoud operative that got directly inside. Where the airstrike one becomes a little bit of a challenge is usually in Tehran. If there's any kind of explosions, social media and other places immediately pick up on it. They're posting it. There was minor reports of an explosion in Tehran late last night, roughly around 1:30 in the morning local there. But there was no corroborating evidence. So again, if it's an airstrike, it's going to be a very surgical one. It's going to be a very small missile. It's not going to be, a 2,000-pound joint direct attack munition, which is, the normal thing that flies from an F-35. Plus, we'd have to evaluate how did Israel get all the way through Iranian layered air defense systems to get to the capital to be able to deliver a weapon like that.
That's the most important point, Colonel Fisher, because every time we look at, and we were looking at all those drone attacks to and fro between Israel and Iran, there's so much time that both countries have to prepare themselves and for alerts to be sounded out, is because of the distance. And over here, would you call this a massive intelligence failure, or the fact that this airstrike would have been carried out from somewhere closer to Iran rather than from Israel?
Yeah, again, you're spot on, right? That when an airplane launches out of Israel, right, and it starts heading towards Iran, it takes a long time to
It
get to
does.
Tehran, right? Exactly. So you'd expect those long-range air defense radars to be able to intercept that target track, to be able to prosecute it, to figure out what's going on, to monitor which direction it's going, to be able to notify people in Tehran that there's an inbound airstrike, and this is what air raid warning signs or sirens are for, right? You know that there's an attack coming. Somehow this attack, if it was an airplane, again, I want to make sure that your listeners understand we're still working on proof, right? We don't, other than for the Iranian government telling us this happened, we don't have a lot, right? So I'm speculating a little bit here for your listeners, and I think that's that's healthy right now because we don't have an option to figure this out. But you're right that this is amazing. The other option for an airstrike would be that Israeli operatives had gotten into Iran and were able to launch some kind of drone, get the drone up into the air in and around the Tehran area. This would be a smaller munition, right? We'd have a smaller warhead, smaller frag pattern. This could go in a little bit easier undetected, and the time of flight or that reaction time would be significantly cut down.
Well, also, interestingly, this is not the first time Ismail Haniyeh left Qatar. The Israeli forces could not have carried out a strike inside Qatar. That is a given. So they waited for him to come out, but he did come out during Ibrahim Raisi's funeral as well. He was in Tehran, he was in Iran. Would you say then that the planning started then, knowing very well that this is a country, an enemy state, where one can strike without having to face international condemnation, or for that matter have the international community then rise up against Israel, particularly West Asia, what you call Middle East. So doing it in Iran was maybe one of the best options that they had, but planning it from maybe when he came visiting for Raisi's funeral up until now, knowing exactly what his movements are and exactly where he stays.
Yeah, so in the intelligence community, we call that pattern of life, right? So you develop a pattern of life, right? So you see, how does he travel from the airport to his compound, right? As I understand from the information I've received, he's staying in a compound or a location where he stayed before that he's felt safe, right? So you get those pattern of life movements. How does he travel? How many vehicles? Which vehicle is he in? Because he most likely travels in a convoy, right? A motorcade. Yes. So is he in the second vehicle, the third vehicle? All those things and pattern of life. When does he go to bed? Where does he sleep in the compound? All those things are going to be basically developed. Excuse me there. The other thing that I would point out, and you make an interesting point, and I'll speculate a little bit more, right? When he was in Tehran, he also gave access to, let's say, Israeli intelligence assets to see who his closest bodyguards were, right? This is an opportunity for the Israelis to see and build dossiers on these guys. And when you start building that dossier, you start looking for weaknesses, you look for opportunities. This very well, again, could be an inside job. We just don't know at this point. And I'm very reticent and hesitant to try and figure out, what it is before, because it's a very perplexing situation.
Well, I dare say this is one of the biggest intelligence failures within Iran, because we could talk about Qasem Soleimani, but that did not happen within Iranian territory. So this certainly, would you consider as one of the biggest intel failures?
Yeah, for the Iranian side, I would call it a huge intelligence failure. I would also say, though, given what happened in Beirut just 12 hours earlier, where there was another assassination, right? I would say this is a huge intel victory for Masoud and for Israel, right? One man's victory is another man's loss, and if you're getting two within 12 hours that are worth millions, or in the case of the one in Iran, I mean his value is unlimited to Hamas.
But as an officer, somebody who's carried out operations in the past, what is the planning that one has to do when you're carrying out such an operation? Not just about the operation, but the implications of it, the fact that there could be retaliation in response from none other than Iran itself.
Sure. So it's a little bit of a complex question, right? So we in the West, and I believe you're in the same country, right? We have a separation, a civilian leadership over military operations, right?
Yes.
So the military operators are going to sit there, and we're just going to take orders, right? If you say that there is a hit on this military, general, then I will build a team. We will build a pattern of life. We'll gain the intelligence. We'll come up with a plan, and then we'll practice that plan over and over and over again, and then we'll go execute. But you ask a good question, right? What are the political implications? What are the national security implications for Israel, for the West, for Hamas at large, and for Iran? Is Iran going to retaliate? I think these are all questions that President Netanyahu had to. Again, if Iran's correct, and this is Israel, these would all be questions that the closest to President Netanyahu and himself would have to be able to contemplate and answer. I was never a politician, thank God. So I don't have those answers, but the repercussions could be very profound.
And Israel, in terms of preparedness and preparations, sounding out alerts, ensuring that the citizens are safe, that is something that will be carried out as per procedure. And that is not just political, it has to do with security.
Correct, right? So Iran right now is in a little bit of a recoil mode, right? They've called their leadership together. They've got their equivalent of the National Security Council getting together, talking about this. As I understand from contacts that I have, they're shocked, right? They're in a little bit of disbelief, and understandable. I mean, as you said, this is a huge intelligence security problem. I don't believe any senior Iranian official expected to wake up this morning to this kind of news and have to react to it. So that there's some level of it has to be digested. As that happens, all of the security apparatuses in Iran are going to be on heightened alert. You're going to see probably more foot patrols of police officers. You'll see military out of garrison walking around. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one, for security, but it also gives the people of Iran, right? It gives them some sense that there's a security apparatus out there being visible.
Right. Also, there are most of the operations that are being carried out by Israel where the United States of America, Colonel Fisher, is kept in the loop. Do you think in an operation such as this, that DC would be apprised later, or that they would have informed DC before?
That's a great question. I believe, and look, I worked at two embassies, right? I worked at the U.S. Embassy in Vienna, and I worked at another U.S. Embassy as the senior defense attaché. The United States is Israel's greatest ally, and not just an ally, but the United States gives Israel a lot of money, right? There's a lot of money that goes to Israel. Many of the Israeli weapon systems are provided by the United States, right? And the weapons for those weapon systems is provided by the United States. So Israel's, I don't believe Netanyahu's stupid enough to actually go execute something like this without at least notifying the United States. There's a difference, though, however, between notifying and asking for permission. And I think even if he notified, most likely the folks at State Department, Secretary Blinken and others were perhaps maybe asking for a de-escalation or, saying that this isn't a good idea. But I don't believe that the United States leadership, at least, go ahead.
Can I lay out a third option, not just notifying or asking for permission? What about a joint operation? Do you think this could have been the work of both the forces working together, because the intelligence that's required for such precision strikes, although we do know that Israel has that, could this have been a joint operation? We do not have details right now, but just asking you in terms of the modus operandi, how it was conducted, could America have been involved?
There's a potential. I think that American intelligence may have supported the operation. I'm speculating, but I would suggest under the current administration that we have in the United States, right, that the President Biden administration, with as conservative as he's responded to what's going on in Ukraine and other places around the world, the example I give in Ukraine is he's limited the amount of weapons that can go into Russia. the long-range strike capability, not strike into Russia. You've got, his security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who's extremely adverse to any kind of military operation. It's hard for me to believe that, the senior security advisor to Joe Biden and Joe Biden himself would allow for, no kidding, joint U.S. operations that would in any way jeopardize or potentially put at liability U.S. Special Forces lives. I don't see this president taking that step.
Okay. But in terms of, two more questions, in terms of the negotiations to bring the hostages home, could this operation derail that? Because we're looking at a new president in Iran, and he had hit a conciliatory note with the West, particularly with Europe and the US, trying to restart the nuclear deal. He's known as a reformist, but his first day in office, and he has to deal with this. So are we looking at derailment of the hostage talks, hostage negotiations, derailment of any forward movement between Iran and the United States of America on all those fronts?
If what Iran is saying, right, again, we have to be very careful right now. We only have one source stating this happened. We have no images, no videos, no corroborating evidence from anyone else, right? So if that's the case, you're 100% correct. If we've speculated a lot here, there's the potential that the new president, right, who wants to extend, at least hints to extend olive branches to the West, what if this was an inside job? I'm not suggesting it is. We just need more facts. And if it is an inside job, then he's really going to be embraced by the United States. He can't claim it to be an inside job because he would lose a massive amount of support in the Muslim community. So, for the public appearance, this could absolutely be like it's Israel. Back channel diplomacy could actually say, okay, hey, yeah, this was us, and we still want to develop our relationships with you. So we just don't know at this point.
Okay. And final question, Colonel Fisher. What are the implications that you see in the region, in West Asia, in the Middle East, and